it's Stephen Bedard, and I want to address something that I don't want to address because I've already addressed it, and yet it still seems to be coming up. I hear over and over again on social media that Christianity is being persecuted in Canada. The church is being persecuted in Canada. Christians are being persecuted in Canada. Well, I'm Canadian. I'm a Christian. I'm a pastor. Where's the persecution? I seem to be missing it somehow. And yet there are some people, very often people outside of Canada, but there are people inside of Canada as well, who seem absolutely convinced that the Canadian government is actively persecuting the Christian church. And if you are wondering if that is true, I want to make things as clear as possible that Christianity is not being persecuted in Canada. If you want to see persecution, there's plenty of persecution happening all around the world. There's more persecution happening now than at any other time in history. But you're going to have to look in some other countries. It's not happening in Canada. Now, are there some Christians who are not getting their way or who are not happy with the way things are going? Sure, yeah, that's happening. But hasn't that always happened? Doesn't that happen everywhere? Some people would not be happy with certain things. It seems as if the focus of this debate is about how the government handled the COVID-19 pandemic. And some people are absolutely convinced that the government targeted Christian churches to close them down, to stop them from preaching the gospel. That was not true at all. Yes, Christian congregations, their buildings were shut down, but not just them, other religions as well. All religious gatherings like that were considered to be super spreader events, they were closed down. But it wasn't just that. There was plenty of things that were closed down. I had concert tickets to see a certain performer, and it kept getting pushed back and pushed back because of COVID-19 restrictions. The concert I was going to go to was Roger Waters, former singer of Pink Floyd. Was that a part of the Christian persecution that they didn't want Roger Waters to be having his concert? I don't think so. I don't think that Roger Waters is a Christian. There really was no targeting of Christian churches. They didn't. In Canada, we did not have a situation in which all other groups were allowed to meet, non-religious groups were able to meet, non-Christian religious groups were able to meet, and then just Christian congregations were limited. That was not the case. I lived in a city in which there was a hair salon that really, really wanted to remain open during COVID-19, and they were not happy with it, and they tried, and they broke the rules, and guess what? They had to face some legal consequences. Was that a persecution of hair salons? I don't think so. I don't think that that's what was the case. Whether you agreed or not with how the government tried to respond to the pandemic, it was not a targeting of Christian groups. I don't know how else to get that across. But I realize those who think it was persecution will point and say, well, look, this congregation was fined and this pastor was arrested. And so that's proof that there was persecution that was going on. That is not proof that there was persecution going on. All those congregations had to do and those pastors had to do was to follow the guidelines that were put out to help protect our communities from the pandemic. yes, I understand that many people thought that the pandemic was not that big of a deal, that it wasn't deadly, that people were making more of it than it really was. I realized that the people disagreed with it, but those were the rules that were put forth because that's the understanding of the best way to respond to the pandemic. And the congregations that I have been a part of during this time, we were more than willing to close down. In fact, the one congregation I was at when the pandemic broke out, twice we went to online only, and both times we went that way before the actual timing that was given by the government to say that you can't open the doors, because we wanted to protect our people, and so that we were willing to do that. And so we it's not even just that we were forced to do that, but we would have wanted to do it anyways because we cared about our people and we wanted to protect them from COVID-19. But again, they weren't targeting Christian groups. And if they were trying to persecute Christians, why is it that when we went to online, and by the way, our reach widened with online services, more and more people were able to hear sermons and to hear what was being said in churches. Why didn't the government censor those things or even stop them? Well, the reason they didn't stop them is because an online service doesn't put people at risk for COVID-19. So they didn't care about online services. They didn't care that pastors were preaching over the internet because that was not their focus. So I realize that there's a lot of people thinking that this is happening, this terrible persecution is happening, but it is not happening. The other thing that will come up from time to time is that there are limits on free speech. And some people do not like that. And I understand that. I'm actually a big proponent in free speech, and I think it's important for freedom of expression. But there is something that is known as hate speech. And there are certain things that some people want to say in certain contexts that are not considered acceptable in Canada. But is that a stopping of the preaching of the gospel? First of all, the context that most often people are talking about here is that people want to speak out against the LGBTQ community and have freedom to do that. Well, I know many pastors who continue to preach a very traditional interpretation of the various passages that speak of same-sex interaction, and none of them have been fined or arrested or anything else. They continue to preach that. Is that message popular in Canada? No, it is not popular in Canada. Probably the average person on the street would prefer that churches weren't preaching that, but I don't know of any pastor that has been arrested for doing that. And I definitely know pastors who preach that message very regularly. So I just don't see the persecution. If there was persecution happening, I would be seeing this. This would be something that would be out in the open. There is a huge difference between things not being the way you like and being persecuted. There's a huge difference between disagreeing with a government policy and being persecuted. I want to ask, in Canada, are you allowed to preach the gospel? The gospel about Jesus Christ coming into the world, bringing in the kingdom of God. Are we allowed to preach that message? Yes, we are allowed to preach the gospel. People are allowed to talk about Jesus, to bring people into the church, to disciple people as followers of Jesus. those things are happening, and it is not slowing down. We are allowed to do that. The government is not interfering. There is no persecution of Christians in Canada. And I know from my previous video, the comments that I will get, which are that I am ignorant or I can't see what is happening. I would just turn around and say, I don't think that you can see what is happening. I don't think that you can, first of all, understand what real persecution is, and to realize the amount of freedom we actually have in Canada as Christians to share our faith. We have tremendous amount of freedom, and I'm thankful for the freedom I have in Canada. Thank you for watching this, and please visit me at my website, stephenjbedard.com. God bless.